Cover One Buffalo podcast. You are joining your host, Greg Tompsett, and tonight we're going to be talking about all kinds of fun things. We've got the injuries that have come up, which are not as fun. We have a new name for the stadium. We've got some false positive COVID tests, a Brandon Bean presser, and hold on for a second here. Looks like one of the Cover One members' video is on, or their mic is on. Is someone there?
Hey!
Aaron Quinn, what are you doing here?
I'm back. Just for you. Only here. That's it.
So
me and you, whenever you want it.
The rumor was you climbed to the top of the Himalayas to meditate and find your senses, or is that just what it feels like when you leave social media?
Just over next to my shed, the infamous shed. I went over there and I meditated a little bit and I said, I don't need this nonsense in my life anymore. I can still do the Bills thing. I've been, back in the Slack channel, and that's where I really love talking about the Bills anyway. So, and then you probed me a few times to gauge some interest, and you got such a cute face and such a way about you that I couldn't say no.
Well, welcome back, brother. It's amazing. Really excited. I genuinely am excited to have you back here. It was doable holding down the fort in the off season. I had enough guests on to be able to kind of give it a run here, but it was certainly not without its challenges. And I'm excited to dive into this season, which short of, the whole global pandemic around us and maybe football disappears. If we play football, I actually think this could be one of the more exciting football seasons of our adult life.
Oh, absolutely. And while we're kind of stroking each other's egos a little bit here, I have to say, even though I've been off of social media, I've still been on Slack and paying attention to what you're doing here. And I couldn't be prouder of what you've done and taken this. I think you've taken the entire podcast to the next level. So I'm happy to be back on and jump back on the wagon with this great thing that you've been building and put in a ton of work. And I don't even know if the people that follow the podcast realize exactly how much work you do put in to getting this show up and running every week. So I'm really proud that it's something that we built together, and then you came and took it over to the next level, and happy to jump back on with you, man.
Awesome. No, thank you, man. It's been a lot of fun, and it genuinely has been something that's exciting to kind of get to connect with people. And there's been so many, fun Bills fans and people that want to get engaged in what we do. And that's just been a cool experience to go through. And I wouldn't have had that opportunity without you. So for anyone who doesn't know,
kiss now? Or
I think so. I think that's how this works. That Aaron actually just kind of found me arguing with people in the Slack channel and was like, hey, you seem like you pretend like you know what you're talking about. That might work on this. And that's actually where the show came from. So it's pretty simple where things get started. So it's I think we've done enough reminiscing if we're ready to get into actual football.
Let's talk about it.
So the reason that we're doing that is we actually have a presenting sponsor, which is kind of fun. And going into that kind of thing is exciting in a season like this. So we thought that if we're going to have a presenting sponsor, you want to have someone who appreciates a good time, wants to be able to go through there and might even be, from our hometown and from a place that we want to get excited about to be able to show. So it's something that the people over at Uncle Jumbo's Distillery, and you could find them at unclejumbosdistillery.com. You're able to, be able to have a good time and be able to still be responsible. That they're checking my age. I have to say how old I am to make sure that I'm responsible to enter the website. But you can go in, take a look at, obviously they started making vodka when America needed them. They started making sanitizer. Now you can have a good time with some of the canned products and their blueberry lemonade, raspberry tea. They're coming out with the orange cream soda and root beer float. But something that I'm excited about to be able to go through. I'm actually going to go up to the facility and maybe meet Aaron. We're going to be able to check out where they make all the goodies here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. I meant to get out there last year, and then obviously the season ended and the world totally fell apart. So I'm looking forward to meeting you out there, grabbing some of those and maybe grabbing some wings and kicking back some cans of blueberry, and then hopefully looking for a ride home.
Yeah, do it safely.
Yeah.
So as we get into it here tonight, there's a handful of fun things that we'll kind of get through, but we'll start on a little bit of a downer. Obviously, everybody already knew about the Feliciano injury and kind of having surgery. It looks like we're going to have him out. He likes to talk about that he's coming back week 4, week 5. I have to assume with the loose rules that they put in place now that there's unlimited recalls from the injured reserve, that I think that's going to be pretty strongly utilized by every team. So he's a pretty automatic start there. Tommy Sweeney, already out as well. I think he's a pretty likely candidate to hide on the IR as well. Ed Oliver was out for a little bit, and he was back full go today. Looked like he was really making some hay. But he was one that certainly would have had an impact there if
Making hay is a good term for Ed Oliver. I like that. You snuck that in there.
well, and it's something that being able to have the end of the season he had last year, and hopefully that would carry over. And then, I think it's a human reaction that when we didn't know the reality of the arrest, and we assumed that I certainly take responsibility for this. I assumed it was real. I assumed it was an irresponsible decision. I assumed that it wasn't him being honestly targeted like it looks like that he was. I was like, oh man, did he not take things seriously? Did he not put in the work? And it's sad the path it takes you down. And now seeing everything else that, it really was a very, it looks like inappropriate situation that he was targeted there. And now coming back that he looks fantastic in this camp. And he certainly sounded like he looked great today, because he is, I think, one of the real keys to this defense.
He's going to have a huge impact this year. Like you said, the way he finished last year, I expect him to start on that note. And that was a conversation recently I was having with somebody just about what to expect out of rookies. And, you talk about everyone's hyped up about rookies this camp. And yeah, it's fun to talk about that in camp. But once the games get going, there really is a transition, especially along the defensive line. And it can take 8-10+ weeks for that to really kick in. And luckily, Ed Oliver was able to get it in the second half of the season. And I think that he has it. I think he understands the game, and the pieces that this team's added around him is only going to make his game stronger. So he's one of the guys I'm looking forward to most to see what type of step, because I think that the sophomore step that he can take is going to be one of the biggest ones we've seen in a long time, because his talent off the charts when they drafted him. And so if he got it, and then you put that whole, and he's not in college anymore, and he's taken that full off season of working as an NFL player. Obviously it's a weird off season, but that step, I'm expecting big things from Ed Oliver, and a very large step forward for him in his sophomore campaign.
A guy who probably couldn't afford this is Robert Foster. Is in concussion protocol. I know last year he was probably, in all honesty, the biggest disappointment on the team as far as like expectations coming in. Ended the previous year with that great second half of the year. People arguing that, hey, he's the number one receiver and not John Brown. And obviously I was overboard on the John Brown thing, but I wasn't calling those people crazy. I was debating with them because I thought, no, here's the reasons that John Brown's going to be better. But yeah, you're right. Robert Foster might lead us in yards or touchdowns or something like that. And for him to have 3 catches on the season and started to develop as a gunner and seemed like he had some potential here to maybe carve out a role. Now you bring in Diggs, you draft 2 wide receivers who are both looking really good in camp. This concussion protocol is tough for Robert Foster. Other than I had a couple people, I actually think Ron, who's in the chat now, was mentioning maybe they can hide him on IR and have a chance to sneak him onto the practice squad later rather than the 53-man cut down.
I hate to kind of talk about a player in this way, but I'm not worried about it really either way. I mean, it really was a huge drop off in production. I thought that going into this camp, that if he was healthy, he had a chance to really carve out a niche as a gunner. I thought he did a really fantastic job on special teams, and that he could have carved out a nice little niche there, a Taiwan Jones type niche for himself in the league, where you keep him as the last wide receiver, but he's primarily a special teams guy for you. But not being healthy, and then this team having Neal, Jones, and a couple other guys that can fill those roles, it just makes him really disposable on this team. I thought maybe he had a chance to, we went back and forth a little bit about that Isaiah McKenzie role, and Andre Roberts filling out that role. And maybe he could, be a special teams gunner and kind of get that jet sweep kind of slot guy role in there. But you're not going to do that when you're not available. And few guys can afford to not be available this time of year. Robert Foster's probably the least person. He really needed to come in and prove something. And I just can't see a way where he sneaks into this roster really anyway. But like you said, maybe they can sneak him into the IR, but I'm not even sure the production's there to make that worth it.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough path. And it's funny, the way you phrase that is perfect for the next guy here, that Josh Norman pulled up with a hamstring. It's really hard to know. And of course, Sean McDermott's going to give out less detail, the very bare minimum of what detail is needed, and won't give out anything beyond there of seriousness or level of degree. And he had some really nice reports, people talking about that it, really spoke to how bad of a fit it might have been in Washington, and they might have a last run left here, and was making some breaks on the ball. And yeah, he wasn't keeping up with John Brown or Stephon Diggs in locked man coverage, because he's not going to be that guy. But that when he was there, able to read eyes, make a break on the ball, he was having a lot of pass breakups, a couple of interceptions. And that's what we want. That's what he's going to need to be when you have a good safety net behind you with Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer. Trey White can take the number one guy. He can be good enough to be a smart veteran cornerback too, with a great safety net in Levi Wallace. To me, this is one of those spots where, like, hey, if there was any tinge of anything, all right, go put it on ice until week one. Give Levi Wallace and Dane Jackson as many reps as you can get. We know what we have out of you. I'm not going to read too much into it if he doesn't touch the practice field until that week of the first game. But did you have any concern beyond that?
No, I mean, the only concern that I would have is that these can linger,
Yeah.
and they can linger longer. That's why you don't put a timetable on stuff like
Yep.
this. You just don't know how guys' bodies are, and where they're at. And they're, he's a little bit older in his career where it's at. But as far as seeing him on the field in 2020, I have no worries at all. He is what Vontae Davis was supposed to be, which
Yes,
is kind
literally.
of a bridge cornerback to allow Levi to learn the game a little bit better and come along. Unfortunately, we never had that, and Levi kind of got thrown into that role. But I think I'm maybe on the minority of I'm okay with Levi Wallace playing a few weeks into the season. If Josh Norman takes a couple weeks I'd rather them be cautious with Norman and get him full and ready to go, because the season's a marathon. So I don't care if it takes a few weeks for him to get fully acclimated back into it, and then maybe even rotate him slowly in. Wallace has been, like Ron Beck saying in the chat here, Wallace has been solid. This has
Yeah.
been a top tier NFL defense the whole time Levi Wallace has been here, and he has played a major role in that. And yes, there's some plays that he definitely he would like back, but he's a young player who came in undrafted. He has some deficiencies athletically, but he's overcome those and been a pretty good cornerback, especially when you look at the guy opposite him isn't getting thrown at, Trey White. Guys are going to come pick on Levi Wallace. He's going to get picked on by good quarterbacks and good wide receivers. And I think he's done a better job than fans want to give him credit for. So I'm pretty comfortable with the depth right now. If anyone else gets hurt, I'm going to get a little shaky here with Gain not being there this offseason. But I do think Norman's going to be back, and that's an injury I'm not super worried about at all.
Yeah, one of the names that was out there that I did have on a short list at one point when his first injury first came up, I did go out and poke around at who was out there. One name was Dre Kirkpatrick. He signed with
He
Arizona
did, yeah.
today. Logan Ryan is still unsigned. He's more of a nickel. He actually is. I know Eric will hear this even from where he's sleeping. He would be more of the big nickel kind of set that he calls himself a safety now. He's really been
Yeah.
more of a nickel player. He's not really an outside receiver coverage guy. I know people bring his name up a lot. There's a couple older guys that I just don't think are there. So I really think we're in that space of we need Josh Norman to come back. Levi Wallace is a perfectly reasonable step in, and I've heard good things about Dane Jackson thus far. I don't want him out there on a regular basis, but if you need him in a pinch, I think you could do worse than having him in a short period
Sierra
of time.
Neal did a pretty good
Yeah,
job
yeah,
at both playing on the inside and outside at cornerback at times. I don't want him being the primary number
yeah.
two cornerback, but I
No, but
think
you're
that
right. He'd be out there before Dane Jackson.
I think he can rotate
Yeah.
in if Levi needs a break, and that you won't have a too significant of a drop off. I think that he can play at this level.
The final one, we heard some random comments today that at the end of the field, people saw the training crew checking on Taiwan Jones' lower leg. That's literally the extent of the information we have right now. So I don't really know what else beyond there, but I know it's a chance for you to talk about Taiwan Jones for a second. So I figured I'd tee you up.
I was super mad at him after that Texans game, and I like ripped up all my stuff in the shed that I have, all the pictures that I have of Taiwan Jones everywhere. I ripped them all up, but I forgave him when we brought him back a little bit. I mean, to be honest, I love Taiwan Jones, but that's another one of those injuries where it'd be nice to roll into the season with Taiwan Jones, but he has such a limited role as a special teams primarily player, and you have so many good special teams. The bottom of this roster is something that we talked about for the last 2 years about Brandon Beane getting this roster so good that the bottom, these guys, yes, they matter, but there are so many good players at that level at the bottom of the roster now that I'm not worried if Taiwan needs a few weeks, or frankly, if he isn't on this roster at the end of the, camp here in September, if he's not on the roster, I'm okay with that because there's so much depth and I feel so good about the guys that they do have running those roles as special teamers.
Yeah, I'm not concerned. We'll see where it goes, but
Yeah.
I think just like Keith Farwell said, if healthy, the combination of Taiwan Jones and Saran Neal could be something special. When you have Tyler Medikevich coming up the middle and those two as gunners, you could have
Very special.
some special teams coverage there for the season.
Yeah, absolutely.
The next piece we're stepping into is going to be a new segment, and the rest of the season is going to be a little bit different. But I figure this is a chance to have some fun, just interaction with fans. Since Aaron has taken a very healthy break from social media, which I think some other people could probably use, we want to make sure he's not missing out. So if during the year, each week, we're going to have fans submit what's the worst thing on Twitter that Aaron missed this week, just to help remind him of why he wants to keep his healthy distance from that horrible website. So you can tweet it at me.
Is this excluding your takes?
Yes, other than the things that I say. What
Okay.
is the second worst thing that you hear on Twitter besides my takes?
Yeah.
And you can tweet him at me. You can tweet him at Eric because he'll be confused. He doesn't know I'm inviting, the at cover one handle. But you can tweet him at me, and then I'll post them and we'll screen share it during the show. But we figured today to ease into it. There's probably a handful of fans out there that are just getting ready for football. We're 3 weeks away. So there's a few new things that I'm going to do a refresher on that today will be just in case Aaron didn't sit down and read the CBA while you were away.
I didn't.
There's a couple of rule changes that I'm going to run through real quick just to make sure that the common ones that people are talking about. So, one of the first ones is the roster cut down and people getting excited about, oh, now it's a 55-man roster. So kind of, you still have to cut down to 53 man. So the 53-man roster is still the cut down. It's on September 5th at 4:00. I think it's a Friday afternoon, or it's Saturday afternoon to cut down to. And then during the year, you're able to call up two guys off the practice squad for the 54th or 55th spot on the roster. So during the year, you can do it up to 2 games at a time. So it's another area you can lean into, that having a smart front office and pro personnel department is being able to, Joe Marino almost made me laugh live saying the worst thing on Twitter are the Andre Roberts haters. So welcome, Joe. It's good to see you. So that 54th and 55th spot is, able to be used, but it can only be 2 weeks at a time. So just some people getting excited that, oh, now you only need to cut to 55. You actually still need to cut to 53, and you can use those 2 spots during the year. The Bills will, every team will. They'll have a 54th and 55th guy called up every game, but you can play around with it back and forth.
Gotcha.
Speaking of the practice squad, it now went from 10 to 16. Most people are aware of that. There's been a lot of stuff thrown around about these protected positions and that there's 4 protected spots. I certainly at first was really excited because I thought it was basically like 4 cheap extra roster spots that you could protect and nobody could touch them. It's not quite that simple. You can protect them from Tuesday evening through game time so that nobody can do an end of the week call up and who you have on your roster and basically to cover in case someone tests positive for COVID on a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you have your practice squad guys to bring up. However, every week from the end of your game until Tuesday at 4:00, everyone on the practice squad is eligible to be claimed just like they're on waivers and can be stolen. So, not that we would have done it, but some people brought up, oh, what if Gabe Davis isn't ready? Can we put him in this hidden protected practice squad spot? He could be claimed any week right after game day until 2:00. Or until 4:00 on a Tuesday. It's not some freebie roster spot. They are eligible to be claimed. So I know a lot of people are throwing that around. It is protected, but it's basically protected for an in-week COVID test that you can call up your guys. So it's, just in case anyone had an idea that you could hide there. It is probably going to come into play with a Daryl Johnson or a Vincent Taylor or maybe a Dane Jackson if he doesn't make it,
Christian
or
Wade or
a
no.
really important guys like Christian Wade. So again, kind of calling those things up. That's something that's been thrown around a lot that I'm not sure everybody has fully grasped. The last one is the game day roster spot. There's always been 46, and now it can go up to 48. So before you had 53 guys on the roster, 46 on game day. You always had your 7 game day inactives. Basically, the 54th and 55th spot means you're still going to have 7 game day inactives, but now you're going to have 48 active on game day. The only rule is of those 48, 8 of them have to be offensive linemen. A lot of teams had 7 active linemen. You'd have your 5 starters, 1 interior backup, 1 tackle backup. And there were a couple of teams that had guys who were literally like the Lee Smith of their team had to go play tackle because they lost both offensive linemen and were in a pinch. So now it's 2 more guys. I've actually always wondered why they don't just use all the active spots, but I think there's some competitive disadvantage for other teams that have an injury. But
Yeah, I've never
those are the
understood that
3 main
either.
rule changes
Wait, and
that
other teams have Lee Smiths?
well, obviously not as incredible as Lee Smith, but
Okay.
people who would like to be as good
Yeah,
as Lee
right.
Smith.
Knockoffs.
Yes, knockoff, the TJ Maxx Lee Smith.
Right.
So those are the 3 main rule changes just as a catch up.
Yep.
Throughout the year, each week you guys can tweet in terrible takes, horrible things. I had some good suggestions already flowing in about Manesh. I could see him being a common contributor to this. This is a family friendly show. My nephew Colton is probably listening right now. He knows more about the Bills than probably half of you listening, and he's 9. So people like that are watching our show. So we're gonna keep it family friendly.
And
But
sports only.
yeah, bring me the worst sports takes that Aaron missed out on by not being on Twitter, and we'll share them live on the show, the best ones that we get each week.
I'm looking forward to
Now,
that. Thanks for
we
bringing
are
Twitter back to my face
yes,
as I'm
yes,
trying to leave.
just
I
a
really
little bit. Well,
appreciate that. Putting the drugs right back in front of me.
I am doing it as a healthy reminder of why not to go back to it, because
Gotcha.
this is how horrible it is. It's that kind of training and psychological warning.
Smart.
Now, getting back to it, during the year, we're going to get back to our fun segment of the Uncle Jumbo's responsible play of the game, but we didn't have a game today. So we wanted to have a way to talk about this. So we're going to talk about Uncle Jumbo's player spotlight. So something that, you think you'd be sitting around enjoying an Uncle Jumbo's cocktail and would want to be able to talk around a campfire and just say, hey, why aren't people paying more attention to this guy? Or why do people feel that way about this player? Aaron, who do you want to speak about this evening?
So this is a conversation. I've been in the Slack channel and seen the conversation a number of times, and I know Twitter well enough to know that this conversation's happening on Twitter often. And it's one that I wish I had Twitter for still, so I can engage in this conversation, because somehow Trent Murphy became this year's star Latulele. Now the Stars opted out for the season. Right in his place came Trent Murphy, and everybody's just trying to find ways to cut Trent Murphy. And if he does get cut just because he doesn't plan out, or Empaneza comes up and he can just make him disposable, or the Bill signed Clowney or something like that, I'm all for it. If he gets cut by just not being good enough to be on the roster, I'm totally fine. But just the people trying to find ways to cut Trent Murphy this year kind of boggles my mind, because I don't know if he's as bad as public opinion of him is. I know he had that rough first year with the team, and the contract gets everybody riled up. And I know that that's really what happened with Star Latulele was the contract. The fans just had that stuck in their mind, and they didn't see the stats popping out when they look at Pro Football Reference. They can't find the stats that justify the contract. But I'm telling you, when you compare Trent Murphy to the rest of the guys that the Bills have and that they've brought in, when you do the comparisons, even in the stats, it's not that bad. Trent Murphy's right there. He actually had a pretty good year last year, and he led the Bills
sacks in the last 6 games.
And he led the Bills defensive line in snaps. You don't just cut a guy that checks all the boxes for Sean McDermott as far as a player is concerned, as far as the mindset that he brings to this team. But then he's also still is being a productive player and playing in his role and doing the things he's being asked to do. And he was out there more than anybody last year. So I don't think that this is just some disposable guy that they're just looking to clear the cap space for. Maybe you can get in. I know you understand the cap and the ramifications, but correct me if I'm wrong, is cutting Trent Murphy going to be whether or not they're able to keep Trey White and Matt Milano next year if they cut Trent Murphy or not. Is that going to prohibit them from doing that move, or are people just looking for a reason to cut this guy because they don't like the contract?
So, we've talked about Brandon Bean taking the medicine for us here 2 years ago when we had the NFL record
Right.
NFL dead cap hit. And he did that so that he can now make football decisions and isn't forced to make financial decisions. The scenario that you presented is exactly how I think a lot of fans think about this, in that, oh, if we don't cut Trent Murphy, and don't get me wrong, it is $8 million. That is a
Sure.
real legitimate amount of money. And that he's probably the only player where there's a real tiebreaker, that if he doesn't fully beat out the other guy, the money could be enough to break the tie. But he's not, there's no circumstance where he's our worst defensive lineman. There's a lot of analytics that show he was our best run defender last year.
Hmm.
Now there was some game I see the plays everybody else talks about where he over pursues and goes past the quarterback and they cut up him underneath him. He did that too much. But he also had 6 sacks in the last 6 games. He had multiple sacks in the playoff game. He had production in what was there. And the same thing that we've talked about over and over, just because you're not a good value doesn't mean you're a bum that needs to get cut. And that, yeah, would I feel better if when Bean did the restructuring deals with Croft and DeMarco and Starr, that he also cut Trent Murphy from his $10 million cap number down to 5 or 6 million?
Love that.
Sure. That would have been great. But his agent knew he didn't have to. His agent knew, no, you can cut us and he'll be unemployed for a day and he'll sign with someone else, probably the Patriots, and he'll sign the next day. And I know I can get him another $6 million, just like Everson Griffin just got. And it's that kind of thing where they just didn't have the leverage to be able to do that. So as far as Trey White and Matt Milano goes, don't get me wrong, $8 million extra dollars isn't nothing. And I remember Joe was listening. Joe Marino did a nice show recently where he went through the cap and who was out there and what we can prepare for next year. An extra $8 million would help. It's not a direct correlation. There are other paths where we can re-sign Matt Milano next year, extend Trey White going into the following year. Now, if we don't cut Trent Murphy and we re-sign Matt Milano, there aren't going to be any other moves. That's pretty much going to be our offseason, and that everything else is going to be filling in veteran minimum guys, draft picks, those kind of, low level pieces. There wouldn't be any free agent spending to speak of. But this is a really good team. And if you keep all the starters and bring back that kind of player, then you're in pretty good shape. So no matter what, I guess that also brings up the point, cutting someone like Trent Murphy, $8 million isn't a free agent spending spree. So prepare yourself. If you're expecting, this is back-to-back seasons where Brandon Bean has signed 19 free agents in 1 year and another freaking 13 this year. That's not happening next year under any circumstances. If you cut Trent Murphy and Hauschka and Lee Smith and every other player that all you guys complain about, he still doesn't have enough money to go on a free agent spending spree. It's just not going to happen. So, brace yourself for that no matter what. And I would much rather see, there are so many positives for this team in continuity and same head coach, same GM, same quarterback coach, defense coordinator, offensive coordinator, so many positive things, the most returning snaps of any team in the previous year. If everyone keeps talking about how important that is, go all in on this season. Spend the $8 million to have a really nice 8th defensive lineman and 4th defensive end and Trent Murphy to ease in AJ Epinesa. Go all in and go win me a championship. I don't need the $8 million to feel better about future years. Have the best team you can this year.
I don't know how many times you probably got sick of me saying last year on the show and the year before that the day Bean walked into this team, everything was about the 2020 season, of getting the roster prepared for the 2020 season. And that was part of the taking the medicine of the dead cap. That wasn't about just the next season. It was about the 2020 season. It's always been about this. You're going in, Josh Allen's year 3, huge year for him. You got that quarterback. You got Tremaine Edmonds going into his 3rd year. All these contracts are coming up. You're just seeing some of the big key pieces are starting to get re-signed. They are all in on this Bills team. And unfortunately, it's such a weird year, but you said it going into the year that Bills fans, I think the reason we're so worried about the NFL season starting or not isn't just because we love football and it's just that there's something really happening with this
Yeah.
Buffalo Bills team. And you just listed all the reasons, the continuity. This was a good team last year, and you're bringing everybody back, but adding talent on the
Yeah.
offensive side of the ball where you needed it. I don't know that this is a Bills team anymore that makes sense to just start cutting people just for those cap savings. I trust you when it comes to the cap. So if there is some legitimate reason for that and he does get beat out, again, I'm all for that. But if it's we're trying to go take a real run at a championship this year, and we believe that this team has that, I think that he's a big piece of that. He was a big piece of a top-rated defense a year ago. I think that he's everything Sean McDermott wants in a defender, and he brings it in the locker room. You just see that mentality. He helps to build that culture. Somebody in the Slack channel was saying, at some point you got to get over the culture thing, or you don't need these leaders. I don't believe Sean McDermott believes that at all. I think that's something that he's always nurturing, always fostering. And if he has guys like that, he wants to keep those guys as much as possible. And I'm not going to sit here and pound the table for Trent Murphy and say that they need to keep him or there's no championship at all. I think that this can be, I don't think Trent Murphy's the difference between a Super Bowl contending team or not. I'm not going to go that far or anything like that, but I think he fits well on this team. I think he knows his role on this team, and I think he's good for a young defensive end like Empaneza. And I think that he's good for a guy like Ed Oliver to just show them how a pro is supposed to be. And I know there's a lot of those guys, but Sean McDermott's going to tell you can't have enough of those guys.
Yeah. And how can you question what he's built and turned around here, that having enough good decision makers and good lead by example guys has a trickle down effect?
Yeah.
And there's 2 points to keep in mind for why Trent Murphy has a much better chance of making this roster than many people think. One is that removing him would be feasible if your starting 2 defensive ends were 25 and 27 and ready to play 75% of snaps. Jerry Hughes and Mario Addison are not that. Jerry Hughes and Mario Addison are still really good players. They're still our starters. They're on the wrong side of 30, and they're not only not ready to play 75% of snaps, they're ready to play 50% of snaps because we have guys like Trent Murphy and AJ Epinesa. The other side of that is and I had this discussion with a couple other people, the expectation of development with a guy like Daryl Johnson. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm open to the fact that he is from a small school that didn't play a high level of competition, has all the physical skills, and there's a chance his leap from year 1 to year 2 is so obvious that in camp they say, man, we can't expose that guy to waivers. We need the $8 million. He's good enough and ready. But let me warn everybody that has to be a leap in production, because he was really bad last year. He was so bad that after the Eagles game, they had to stop playing him on defense because he was an automatic audible to run directly at him every play until they took him off the field. And the rest of the season, the final 8 games, he never played more than 5 defensive snaps. Most of the games was 1 or 2. That also happened to be when Trent Murphy went on his run of 6 sacks in 6 games. It's that kind of thing that, don't get me wrong, he could improve, but he has to improve just to be roster caliber.
And that's going to be tough for him is having no preseason. A guy like that to make that leap where you get other teams really looking at you, unless a team fell in love with him in the draft process, which he went undrafted. So nobody fell in love with him that much during the draft process, probably similar to the Bills. Here's something. My brother's a Bears fan, and we've done that podcast a few times. And we talk about it all the time. Every fan base has a few of these guys at the bottom of their roster that is supremely athletic. I mean, we're talking about the NFL. They got some guy that's
there are no bad
guy,
athletes on the team.
super athlete that just hasn't figured it out yet. Everyone's got those guys on every team across the league that they're worried everyone's going to snatch up as soon as he hits the waiver wire. It doesn't always happen like that. And we see it every year with the Bills where everyone freaks out that guys are going to get claimed off waivers and then they're back on the practice squad in a couple of days. It usually doesn't go the other way. If it does happen, again, I'm not going to lose sleep over Johnson getting claimed off waivers. I can't see him making that large of a leap to make Trent Murphy dispensable going into the 2020 season. Now, if we just talked about at the beginning of the show how it took Ed Oliver half the season to kind of figure out how to play defensive line at the next level. I don't know where Empineza is at going
Yeah.
into this year, but he might take some time. So I know people are saying, well, we've got him. We don't need Trent Murphy anymore. I'm not sure. All we're getting is a few clips from practice and some beat reporters who are giving their view of how things are going, but they're not scouts. These guys
Yeah.
aren't out there scouting these guys. So a lot of this is unknown to the fans right now, including myself, that we don't know who these guys are. So for me, I want to roll with the guys we do know, and I want to roll with the production that we have seen. And Trent Murphy's is not as bad as I think that the popular opinion is on him. And yeah, has he lived up to the contract?
No.
Probably not.
No.
But if you really look across the league, how many guys live up to contracts? It's pretty rare. You get paid for past things that you have done and potential. Very few guys live up to contracts, and
There's
very
not
few
many
guys are a
Micah
great
Hyde. Yeah.
deal.
Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer are by far
Yes.
the exception. Most free agents are not like that, where you're like, oh man, they're so underpaid. We might need to give them a pay bump like Jordan Poyer
Yeah.
just
Jordan
got.
Poyer's
That's
still
like,
underpaid.
yeah, that's like the 10%. 90% of people who send free agent deals did not pan out.
Yeah.
Yeah, Thomas just brought up the Quentin Jefferson could be an example of that. That maybe you stumble on a guy there that was in a rotation, or John Feliciano was a good
Sure.
example
Yeah.
of that. Quentin Spain was a good example of that. Most of the time, you're not going to have those kind of values.
Right.
So no, I think that was great. That's exactly what this kind of Uncle Jumbo's player spotlight is going to be leading up to the season. It's just picking out guys who are maybe in that controversial spot. I think that you and I are maybe on different sides of the coin from a kicker standpoint. So I think that'll maybe lead into some of the ones coming up here as we get into the season of.
Should we just pick sides on Andre Roberts and fight about it, since everyone wants to talk
Yeah,
about that too?
since I spent most of my day arguing with people on
Yeah.
Twitter about Andre Roberts, it's
Yeah.
a fun way to spend the day. So a couple other things that have come out. Obviously, the announcement came out about, unfortunately, our friends over at New Era Cap are hitting some tough financial times. And I did read a little bit about this, that at the time that they signed that deal, nobody really knew what Fanatics was, and they're everywhere now and selling everything and have just smoked people in that space. And that, unfortunately, I actually read that they missed a good chunk of payments last year. Not only were they not going to be able to make the payments this year, I think the Bills kind of, I don't know how much they're taking them to court over unpaid services, but I don't think they paid all the bills for last year in the naming rights. So I think that they mutually agreed to end that. The Bills have now decided to name them, ready, Bill Stadium. It's the short-term name, and I know a lot of fans wanted to go the kind of honoring route, call it Marv Levy Stadium, go back to Ralph Wilson Stadium. From a business standpoint, I want to make sure people understand this is free money. It costs you nothing to let someone name your stadium. They pay for all the signage and all the things that are there. It's pure profit. You absolutely have to do that. Do you have any thoughts on the naming of the stadium or the handling of it, or any ideas of things that you would actually like to see from that direction?
I have a couple. Well, first of all, Fanatics hats are not New Era hats. So people need to go out and support New Era. They make the best hats, even though their draft hats have been pretty horribly designed over the last 3 to
They're
4
still
years.
really good quality.
The New Era makes the best hats. It's not even close. The low profile 5950 is the best hat in the entire world, and I will fight any single human being
sitting right there out of camera view.
It's the best hat in the world. And if you want to fight me about it, I will meet you anytime, any place. It's the greatest hat. So buy them and support it. It's a local Buffalo company, and they hire a lot of people. I know a lot of people that work there. It's a great company, and I'm feel bad that they're going through what they're going through. But as far as the naming rights, I don't care that they called it Bill Stadium. I would like there's a scenario as a fan where I'd like it to go back to the Ralph or some name associated team history where you could still sell the rights and call it whatever bank at Ralph Wilson Stadium or whatever it is. There's examples of that all over the place. The Process Palace is another name that I came up with that we could maybe call it, but I agree with you. It's free money. I do think it would have been smart to come up with some type of name that they could throw a name in front of, because this is going to be the problem Buffalo has. And I don't want to get into a conversation about a future stadium, but Buffalo is going to have a problem getting big business bought in to the idea of the Bills, because we don't have like a lot of the other cities. If you go on Forbes right now and look up Fortune 500 companies and how many are in each city, Buffalo, as far as NFL teams, has one of the lowest.
Yes.
So they're going to have trouble if they build a new stadium. They're going to have trouble selling the suites, unlike Minnesota, who has the most. They could
Yes.
easily sell
Oddly.
those
Yeah.
suites.
People who don't know, there's a ton of Fortune 500 companies in
Huge
Minneapolis. It's
presence of
crazy.
Fortune. Yeah, they have so much money out
Same
there.
reason Charlotte. Charlotte has a
Charlotte.
ton of big
Yes,
corporations.
exactly. Buffalo doesn't have that. And Buffalo's going to struggle to get a big company to come in and put their name on a stadium that isn't local to them.
Yeah.
M&T Bank already has their name on a stadium.
That-
That would be the next one here in
Yes.
Buffalo. The list is very short for Buffalo. So I think it's going to be something that maybe has to rotate over the years. They're not going to get the big dollars that some of the other stadiums get because they just don't, the business isn't here. So it's going to be a tough draw for them. So I thought that it might be better to have a more foundational name that you could attach advertising to. And as that changes over the years, it's still the Ralph or it's still the whatever, but then you can still get the signage and get that money.
Some of them have done it with the field. Like you could call it Ralph Wilson Field. It, and
Correct.
so there actually is precedent for two stadium names. So M&T Stadium, M&T Bank, which is actually more local to Buffalo than it is to Baltimore. For anyone who doesn't know, the Ravens play in M&T Field,
Right.
or M&T Stadium, I think it's called. So they could technically do both. Mercedes-Benz actually has not only the Superdome in New Orleans, but the Georgia Dome, or the new Falcons Dome, whatever it's called, in Atlanta.
So you just have to call
division.
it a different, not stadium or whatever.
Correct.
You'd have to,
so you would have, M&T Fieldhouse, you'd have something like that where it'd be slightly different. So there is some precedent for that. And I do think there's a little bit of buying low on a upcoming asset. I think people see a positive trend for the Bills. They now have 5 primetime games for this year. That's something that those kind of people are looking for. They're not caring about how good the team is. They're talking about, hey, is it on a trajectory where we're going to get more public sponsorship in primetime games? That's what we're paying for, to have the name out there, is when it's on Sunday Night Football, Monday Night Football. So M&T Bank is not a 0% chance, but I don't know that they're ready to do that. People are throwing out all kinds of goofy stuff. I actually think one is not all the way crazy. McCormick is, obviously everybody knows them, like the seasoning company. They're a large, huge Fortune 500 company. They own the Frank's Red Hot brand. That one, I actually think there might be enough behind it that McCormick could do it and have it be Frank's Red Hot, something around there with the wings and the sauce and all that kind of stuff. I think there's a lot of easy ones. You do
North
have
American breweries, maybe. I know they
Yes.
own Labatt's, they own Magic Hat, they own a number of, they're a Costa Rican company, but their American headquarters is right downtown Buffalo. There's still some big companies here, and as Michael brings up, not every stadium name is associated to a local business, but I counter that here in the chat that a lot of those ones you'll see are more attractive markets, bigger markets, larger
Dallas,
cities,
Los Angeles.
Yes. And maybe the Bills getting better, like you mentioned, like the ability to be on a Monday night game, to be in prime time and in the playoffs, that will help attract some of these businesses. I just don't know if businesses see this as that opportunity yet.
Yeah, you also obviously have plenty of other people that are using this as a publicity grab. You have your adult entertainment sites. You have Tushy, which I think is a toilet paper delivery company, if I'm right. And obviously the gentleman over at Barstool.
No.
Those are all the different things. This is purely a publicity grab. There is no scenario where
The
any of
NFL
those are
won't
going to
even
be considered by the NFL. They literally ban them from every event and won't even take their charity donation money in things. They're not going to let them name a stadium. So I know we have a lot of fans that overlap in the Barstool circles and our show. So I appreciate people being excited about that, but you need to brace yourself. That's not a viable option. So one that was out there that I actually came from, for anyone who's on Twitter and knows Buffalo Wins, Joe
Never
over
heard of him.
there. I have no idea who that is. He actually had a decent idea that you could do an awful lot of things with a Marvel Coliseum, and that there's a lot of money in that Disney space in Disney Plus, and that there's a whole lot of fun superhero themed things you can do, and they have a ton of money to throw around, and that I don't there's obviously already a lot of connection with ABC and ESPN and things like that. So I don't know if there's some conflict of interest with the ownership rights, but that one, when they got thrown out there, there's a ton of money out there for that kind of stuff that I could get excited about having to be Marvel Coliseum.
The first thing that pops in my head is they wouldn't want anything to do with a rundown building
Yeah,
like
yeah.
we had. That would maybe be a scenario in a super
The
luxurious
new fancy one they
dome.
just showed in LA yesterday.
Yes, something like that, or the one that everybody believes that's going to get built downtown on the water here in Buffalo, some super fancy thing but I don't know that a company, and that's going to be the problem for the Bills, is you have a stadium that's older, you have a team that in the national eye still is a questionable team, not the best franchise history to land big companies with big followings. The creativity, I will give it to him. I didn't think of anything like that. The creativity is very much there, and it's probably one of the 3 or 4 good takes that he's had. No, just kidding.
Oh,
He's a fine follow.
I'll give Rick some credit here. I like in the chat here talking about SpaceX Stadium. I'll take Elon
Sure.
Musk's money. I'm
Uh,
totally fine with that.
it could get a little bit hectic, and I don't want to get into it, but Solar City is right here in
Yeah,
Buffalo, and that could be one. Yeah, Tesla
yeah.
Stadium. There's some big companies. Amazon wants a big presence in this area. You could have an Amazon Stadium. We don't have that yet. They have more. Bezos could throw that money out and never even miss it.
You wouldn't even notice. He would. It's a rounding
No,
error
it's
in his
gone. Yeah,
monthly
he'd make
expenses.
more during the game than he spent on the stadium, right? So it wouldn't even matter.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, we'll wrap up the show here with a couple things. Obviously, everyone woke up today to the initial announcement about some mystery positive COVID tests, a bunch of practices getting pushed back, the Browns canceling practice, the Giants canceling practice. It does seem like everything is coming back around to being one testing center in New Jersey that appears to
Freaking New
be false
Jersey.
positives. Obviously, dirty things in New Jersey, that makes sense. So I want to be careful not to completely rule this out, but I know with the Bills, there were 4 players. All 4 of them tested negative on site today. Josh Allen was one, Harrison Phillips, Quentin Jefferson. There's multiple guys. All of them got positive tests back that came back overnight. It was, all the other teams were still consistently well below 1%. Very few positive tests once on site. Almost all the positives were in guys showing up from outside environments. All of a sudden, a bunch of teams had a bunch of positive tests, and all of them were from this one center. Every single guy across the league that was having a positive has tested negative on site. So I think that it seems like this was a mistake in the lab. It's not the only time we've seen this. We've had other people in the overall news to have false positives for testing. So I think it's just kind of the nature of this
People in my
business.
life have
Yeah,
dealt with it, traveling, coming back and forth from traveling, have dealt with false positives. I'm not an epidemiologist. I know that might
yeah.
shock a lot of people
In your spare time.
listening. So I'm not going to get into the information about it. But going into this week, I was talking about it with my wife. I think this was a big week for the NFL. You've had these guys now together. You've had these protocols in place. If there's going to be some kind of outbreak, it's going to happen here in the last week and this week of, are they doing things right? Because
Yeah.
if they're not, you're going to have some type of outbreak spreading through these teams and through the league. And seeing that this morning scared me
Yeah.
when they were rumblings of what the tests were. And then quickly, I will say kudos to all the Ian Rappaports and Adam Scheffner's out there for getting that information together quickly and really discussing what was going on. Cause I was able to just say, okay, people were putting in the Slack channel what was happening. I was like, come on guys, give me some, I'm gonna have to get back on Twitter here in a second. But luckily it, like you said, it does look like this one lab just had a bad day.
Yeah.
Or something like
Yeah.
that. And I don't think the NFL is going to want to do business with them. They might be switching. That might be a big deal where
Yeah.
they're switching laboratories, because this is something that's going to continue here throughout the 2020 season.
Oh, yeah.
So fans got to brace, because there might be another run of this. And this is, Brandon Beane, I think, alluded to it in his press conference. This is the kind of thing that can happen during a game week. And then Josh Allen's out because he has to be pulled away from the team until he goes through another 2 rounds of tests. So this is probably a good
100%.
example and an emergency for a team to go through this process now while it's not in the regular season and deal with this. And I think that Brandon Beane probably took this as a learning example to say, hey, everybody in the building, all hands on deck, we got to go through and figure this out. And now the Bills know what to go through if this happens during the season.
Well, and I think it's a great contingency plan, and he called it a fire drill, and I thought it was a great
Fire
way to
drills,
talk
yes,
about it.
right.
Is that it was for the league as well because they talked through. Okay, was what we're doing the right process here? That we need to have those last cutoff tests can't be Sunday morning. Like that can't be you can't run a game plan that way. So that they're talking about their final cutoff test is going to be either Friday evening or Saturday morning, and then at that point, you are going to
You're
have to
playing.
be able to say, hey, sorry, even if false positive, you're out. But now you have a data plan of what's there. It also talked about, he did bring up, I think it was Vic Carucci who asked, does this shake your confidence in the system? And he spoke to it and said, hey, we've had thousands of really properly handled tests. This is the first time something like this is coming up. If it were to happen again or more than once, yeah, that would shake your confidence. I'm not ready to say that, hey, that's not, we need to fire them immediately, but I will assume there's some serious repercussions. This is really poor publicity for the league. They don't want to hear this kind of thing when you're trying to take as many precautions as you can. But going through those kind of steps to be able to do that puts you into an interesting situation to be able to figure out how to do this. I like the way the team handled it. I like that they didn't cancel practice. So they said, no, this is a good scenario to run through. What if we lose? There was 3 defensive linemen. What if we lose 3 defensive linemen all at once and we have to figure out how to do this? Let's go through and figure out what we would do today. What if we do lose Josh on a Friday and Matt Barkley has to get ready for the game? What are we going to do? This is a great run through of contingency to prepare in case worst case scenario happens. So you're able to prepare for that. So I really like the fact that they approached it that way, took it as a learning opportunity. And people may think that that's cheesy or silly. That situational preparedness is real. That's a real thing in life.
Oh
That,
yeah.
things that you prepare for and talk about and are able to run through and have done once, when the real thing happens, you are more prepared. That's just life. That's the way things work. So I love the way that they approached it, and I'm not shocked at all. That's the kind of thing I would expect from Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane.
Honestly, I'm surprised they haven't just done that and said
I
5
can't lie.
random dudes have done false positives and we're practicing anyway, and this is how it's going to be because this is Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane's MO is to
In my
over
car
prepare.
today, I had the thought, did Sean McDermott do this?
Just
Like, did
put a
he do
scenario
this?
together.
Did he plan this
Yeah.
and make it so the team had to have losing Josh and multiple guys in one player group, and he plotted this? Did he plant this?
And not just to see how the players respond. How are the coaches going to respond? How is the staff going to respond? How is the secretary going to respond? These are the
Yeah.
things that they care about. And
Especially the training crew.
yes.
The training staff is key.
Yeah, and they got that without having to go through it themselves. So I think this was a win today. If you can take some positive out of that, I think it was a win for the organization. I think that they probably learned a lot today about what their processes are. And another thing I liked about this and what Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane said was that anyone that didn't feel comfortable didn't have to practice and they weren't going to hold it against. And I believe that. I think a lot of people would say that and say, oh, you don't have to practice, but then we're going to take note of that and
Yeah,
hold that
yeah.
against you. I believe, and they've said it all throughout this, that they want people to feel very comfortable in the building. They have open communication with these players about what is
With their
comfortable to them.
spouses, with their families.
Yes, because whether or not people listening take it seriously, they are taking it seriously, and they want their players to be in a comfortable environment. You hear every free agent come through, talk about it. You hear all the players. This is a family unit, and to have a family unit, you need to have that trust and openness about what's comfortable for you. And so, hearing that again just kind of confirmed all those things about the culture and family environment that they're building here in Buffalo, and that thing matters to them. That hey, if you're not sure of these tests and you have a family member at home that's high risk and you don't feel comfortable coming into play, do not come into the building today, and that won't be held against you. And I think that's an admirable stance to take.
Yeah, and like you said, I believe it's genuine. I don't think it's that kind of hollow speak that a lot of people say the right thing because they think they're supposed to say it. I think it's genuine from
Yeah.
him, and I love the way that you talk about especially players who have been on multiple teams and you hear comments from their spouse to say, yeah, it was crazy when we joined here. you know, I had Kim Pagula and the head of HR and the player services rep all call me directly, like not, hey, here, give my husband the phone number and you can call me if you need that kind of, you know, generic thing you always
Right.
get from people like, oh, call me anytime you need. Like, no, they actively called out and they had lists of services and people to help with everything because they wanted you to feel supported and welcomed and at home. That kind of stuff matters. Like that kind of stuff gets around the league. That's the kind of thing that now you hear about Bills players recruiting other free agents, and you hear about people saying, yeah, I wanted to come here because I think it's a place you can be your best self. That kind of stuff's real when you get around those circles.
Yeah, and maybe it doesn't matter when you first get out of college and you're a young guy,
Sure.
but your family structure and that support at home, which that's what they're trying to build in the building. In order to build that in the building, the people have to have that when they go back home. That family structure is super important to those guys being able to come to work every day and just focus on work. And if the family structure is taken care of and nurtured and feels good, you're going to get the best results. And that goes not just for football, that's every work environment in the world. If the family structure is taken care of at home, the
Yeah,
people that go to work are much more productive. So to see that they understand that and they want to nurture that throughout their time here is a really positive thing, because like you said, the guys that are free agents, a lot of the times those guys are in their mid-20s, they have families, they're coming from a place where they had roots established for the last few years. That's a big move. I know that they're millionaires, but people, they're still human beings. They still have kids that are in schools, they still have wives that are transferring jobs now. So to have those things in place where you can get a call and say, hey, we're here for you, and here's all the resources that we have available to help your family settle down. So whoever you are, whoever husband can come in and be his best version of himself here for our team, because we want to get the most out of you.
absolutely. And it's exciting to be able to have people that you can feel confident are making those kind of decisions, and it's part of the reason that there's reason to have confidence in this leadership group going forward. Um, this has been a heck of a night, Aaron. Welcome back, man. This is a lot of fun. It felt natural. It felt right.
Yeah, your voice soothed me. I'm gonna have one of the best nights sleep I've had in a long time. Just your voice in my ear throughout the rest of the night.
I love it. Well, thank you guys. It was awesome tonight. Really great chat, really great interaction all night. Obviously, it's great to have you back, man. It's so much more fun to have this be a flowing, genuine conversation rather than me just trying to fill up time rambling. I do like to
You
ramble,
can
but
do it. Yeah, you're fine.
it's it's been a lot of fun. Make sure you guys check out our friends over at Uncle Jumbo's, unclejumbosdistillery.com. They've got a new site, really building up their e-commerce presence. Make sure you can check that out. You can get delivery and all kinds of fun things set up now. Find out where you can get it. Make sure you send me your most fun tags. You can tag me in it. Worst thing you saw on Twitter. We'll share that with Aaron next week so he can keep a reminder of why to stay away from that horrible, horrible website. Check it out if you guys are looking. I had a little bit of a thank you giving away 2 Bills Legends jerseys. I had a Thurman Thomas and a Bruce Smith jersey given away to some followers here. It's been a lot of fun being able to get the show going here, and just thought that was a fun way to get things rolling. And part of that is obviously letting people know what we have going on here. So, let people know about the show. Go out there. If there's somebody that is a huge Bills fan, tell them, hey, have you listened to Cover One Buffalo? I think you might like it. It's a lot of fun to be able to catch up on the season. They can go through the position previews to get caught up. Give us a rating, give us a review. Go and lie and tell other people the show is good. Yeah, I mean, we don't actually deserve 5 stars, but you can give us 5 stars. It would be great. Go on out and check out what we have going on. We really appreciate it. We do this just to have fun with you guys. And Aaron, any final parting thoughts to help them? I know you've spent a lot of time in meditation and
Yeah.
being present. Help the people understand how to make their life a little better.
Well, so I'll give one small final thought is I've been reading a lot about Taoism. I'm very much into trying to find some balance. The world got a little out of control for a while, and my own brain felt way out of balance. So I've been trying to get back into that. And once you start reading about this, it's funny because I have a friend that teaches ancient Chinese medicine. He's lived in China doing the Taoist monk thing for years, and we talk all the time. And once you start reading about this, you find it everywhere. And I find it in the Bills organization. I was thinking about it as I was getting ready today. And you think about, balance and just being who you are. And I've never in all my years seen think about the Bills and think about their strengths. It's balanced. all across this team. Obviously, there's questions at quarterback, and you probably are a little heavier at the defensive backs, but there's balance. Like you look at this defense, what's the strength? It's balance all across it. So the Dow is with the Bills, and if the Dow is with the Bills, great things are going to happen, man. They are present. They're with the Dow. So I'm excited for that. But one last thought I want to leave people with. I know most people probably don't care that I left Twitter, but I think there's probably a few. I think I was getting messages from Greg saying, hey,
I
people have
got
been
asked on a
asking
regular
where you
basis.
went. So which I'm sorry that you had to deal with some of that. But if you do want to find me, you can find me in the Cover One Slack channel. So if you want to come over and find me and engage with me, I'm over in the Cover One Slack channel. I'm back in there all the time. And it's still the best place that I've ever had to talk about. I used to be in the forums back before Twitter. I've been on Twitter for a number of years discussing with Bills fans. There's been no better place for me to be a fan and engage with other fans than the Cover One Slack channel. It's by far the best experience I've had online engaging with people about all things Bills. And then I also get all the content from Eric where I don't even have to be on Twitter because I'm getting Eric's content and his insight without having to be on Twitter. So if you want to find me also, if I'm important to you in any way, come over to cover1.net and get into the Slack channel because it's a lot of fun and it's going to be a really fun season and you're going to miss it if you don't get in.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody in the chat. Thank you, Aaron. It was great to have you back. Looking forward to this season. You have been listening to Cover One Buffalo, and we are out.